Howdy friends. Today we're kicking off a new video series for Capsule to Cone, and this one's really exciting for me because we're already kind of in the middle of a series with Anderson Elswick, and we're working through a country song that I'm producing. But for this new video series, I brought in my friend Nate Washburn to produce a song from start to finish that is a rock song. And we had a ton of fun making this song. Nate wrote and recorded all the parts, and I filmed him in action doing some of the stuff, and then got a lot of his thoughts on philosophies about producing records. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to about a 30-second sample of the song and check out some of the footage, and then I've got about a 20-minute interview with Nate where we talk about how he got into producing music and some of his goals for this series. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and enjoy. We're sitting here in the control room, and I'm talking to my friend Nate Washburn about producing rock records. Nate has played in bands for 15 plus years. You're a producer, you're a mix engineer. You worked at Glow in the Dark in Atlanta for 3.5-ish years, roughly, and you're still making records. We want to talk about the records that you are producing, but we also want to talk about how you got into producing and music in general.
I sort of began my musical, artistic endeavors with producing records in a really weird way.
Okay.
Like the very first version of GarageBand that ever was released, I was really into and dabbled with a lot, and was always interested in music production.
So this is like in a home studio kind of setting.
Well,
or a home music room kind of thing.
This is not even,
Okay.
This is so rudimentary and so pure, as a kid. I think I was maybe 15 or 16, and just being able to plug my guitar into a computer and have it come back at me. Before that, I was using a program called Finale Notepad, which is notation. So I'd be programming a drum loop
with just notes
notation.
On it. Yeah.
And it sounded terrible. It's the first MIDI. It's not supposed to be listened to. But I was always interested in making music on a computer and hearing it back, even before I was in a band. And then I was in a rock band when I was in high school.
Okay.
And that was really fun. And then all that kind of interest sort of went to the side. And I made demos for the bands I was in and stuff. But it eventually, years down the road and touring and doing all this other stuff, you get to the point where, we need to make a new record, or and when we don't really have the budget to do it. So what ended up happening is I was like, well, I've always been interested in this stuff, and I'd made demos before, and that's how I wrote a lot of the music that I would pitch to bands I was in. And so at some point I just said, I think I can make, an EP or something for us that we could put out in the meantime while we figure out money to make a full-length record at a real studio or whatever, which we had done a few times before then. I did that. This is getting close to 10 years ago now that would have happened. And then that sort of was just a slow rolling snowball into eventually that becoming a career path.
So you're like the willing guy that's the band dude that all the bands know, and have a computer, you've got a little bit of experience because you've been playing around with this in your bedroom, and so you just kind of naturally ease into it because you kind of know how to make records and can do it super budget friendly at this point, and so you're the guy that
I'm just making
doing that.
The record for free because it's my band, and we don't got any money because we just spent $900 to re-up on t-shirts and stuff. You know what I mean? That's just how that goes. And this is, back before everyone sort of was able to just make great sounding records in their bedroom. This is more like they sort of very advent of this technology starting to be more viable. And you know, when I was messing with stuff, whether it be like Logic or GarageBand or whatever, I was really interested in synthesizer music, not like dance music necessarily or like EDM, but more just like bands I was really into, like The Faints and like Depeche Mode and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was like I liked synth rock kind of. So that was my outlet for figuring out how synthesis worked and stuff, which has played a big part into, you know, me being a versatile producer and having that sort of knowledge at my fingertips just from playing around with it for years. But I make an EP with my band. Other local bands hear it and go, oh, this sounds pretty good. You know, this sounds interesting. Yeah. It was like this thing where I had two microphones. I had a 57 and an SM7B and an M-Box. Okay. And that's what the record was made on. So, like, the drums are just, like, point the 7B at a kick drum.
So were you using the M-Box with Logic, or did you have Pro Tools at that point?
I had Pro Tools, and I couldn't figure out how to work it. So I switched to Logic. Okay. Yeah. Nice. I couldn't figure it out. It took me like a half hour to figure out how to record something. Yeah. Because on Logic you hit R. Yeah. And then you're going. Now you're going. I was like, hit R in Pro Tools. Didn't work. I'm stumped. Yeah. You know? No. So yeah, this is just very simple. Like it's just a means to an end to me at this point. I want my band to put out music. Because I want to play more shows and I want to go on tour and I want to, you know, we were right on the cusp of a record deal at the time. So it was like, I was just, you know, I wanted to go. Yeah. So like learning the technique of recording things, I didn't care. It was just like, let's just make cool songs. It was always about songs for me. I didn't really care about the technical stuff until like even, you know, maybe till I moved to Atlanta and like actually start diving in and really getting interested in the technicality of making records and this sort of like precision that you can get into. But all this time, you know, bands are hitting me up and saying like, well, we record, I got a demo I want to record. Okay, sure. And then eventually someone comes along who wants to pay me money to do a song. You know what I mean? If the band thing would have taken off, I wouldn't have cared. Like, that was always the goal. It's like, I wanted to be in a band. Gotcha. Turns out I'm terrible at, like, managing a band and, like, being in charge of a band. Okay. Now, I know that now, but I didn't know that then. You know, it's just not in my skill set. Sure. So, these bands start hitting me up. Oh, we want to make records or we want to make a song or whatever. So, then I start making a little bit of money off of it. And I'm still just sort of like doing things my own way. I don't really, you know, we've talked about this, but I'm not, I wasn't that curious. I wasn't like trying to figure out how other people did stuff. Yeah. And I had friends who worked at like actual studios. And so I would pick their brain from time to time, but it's just a means to an end. I wanted to make music with other people and like create, you know, something I thought was cool and special and write songs. That was what I wanted to do. Gotcha. So then, you know, a couple years, maybe like 3 years from the time I start doing my own band, I'm playing in a totally different band. And we're doing like much bigger, longer tours. And so then we're discussing, well, where do we want to make our next record? We end up making the record at Glow in the Dark. We intended to make it with Matt Goldman. And that didn't work out, so I ended up making the record at Glow in the Dark. Right. With Matt's help, because I didn't know. I'd never used any real gear before, you know, no outboard gear. I'd never touched a console, never used a ribbon mic, nothing. I didn't know anything. Right. And Matt was sort of gracious enough to sort of hold my hand through this arduous process of making a record at a studio I had no business making a record in. Sure. It happened. It's a great record. Author of Brighter Days. It's a cool record. I was still super proud of it. I think it turned out great. Yeah. And after that record, Goldman was like, "Hey, I think you're cut out to do this. Maybe you should move to Atlanta." So he told you that and said, not kind of opened the door. Not in those exact words, but that was kind of the gist of it. Like, hey, you should consider this. Sure. Coming here, working here. Oh. You know. And so that was this sort of big shift, this life-altering shift of me saying, "Oh, okay." Okay. Yeah. You know, it wasn't instantaneous. I think it was like maybe a year and a half maybe not quite that long, where, at that point in which I moved to Atlanta and started making records full time, which I was doing during that year and a half. I was actually kind of booking records at Glow in the Dark, flying down or driving down with the band, and then staying there for like a month or two, working on the record, then going home.
Yeah.
And and then my wife and I talked about it. And I was like, let's move to Atlanta. I think it'd be fun. What's the worst that can happen?
What's the worst that can happen? And so
if only we knew.
And now you're making records. So I want to go back to something that you talked about earlier. You talked about trying to get this all started for you right at the advent of kind of home recording becoming a thing, and that's what enabled you to kind of get your foot into the door to becoming a producer. So let's talk about that for a second. As somebody who now produces records as the main thing that they're doing day in and day out, year round. I mean, obviously you still play in bands, you're still songwriting and doing other things too, as one does in the music industry these days. But let's talk about what is, in your mind, the reason that a band that's doing rock music, a lot of rock bands these days are doing the DIY thing because it is getting significantly easier. It's getting significantly cheaper to get really good sounds from a very minimal setup. What's the reason that somebody would decide to say, okay, maybe our last record we did DIY, but this time we think that we need a producer? Or what would you tell a band that's maybe they're on the line and trying to decide between the DIY thing and getting a producer?
Yeah, it's something I talk about all the time, because right now, with where technology is at, pretty much anybody with a little willpower could make a great sounding record in their bedroom.
Sure.
Like, I think that's absolutely a reasonable thing to accomplish. And that's great. I'm not the type of person who's like, woe is me, people can make a record without going to a cool studio and working with a producer. Some bands are cut out to do that. I say that as someone who is absolutely cut out to do that. You know what I mean? I'm not really the type of person that would work with another producer. Not that I never have or will again, but yeah, I'm a little bit of a control freak, so doing things yourself can be the right way to do it. Now, on the flip side, what I'm offering and what people like Goldman or yourself are offering is the opportunity to bring someone else into the fold who can hopefully elevate your project, not just like in how it sounds, because it's not rocket science pointing a mic at a guitar cabinet and getting a guitar sound. That's not out of anyone's reach.
Right.
But having experience with like experimenting with sounds, or really for me, the big focus when I'm producing a band is more on like their performance, the parts, like part writing, songwriting. Like that's the thing that I firmly believe, if you're making a record with me, you're not going to make the same record. No matter who you make it with, whether it's yourself or another producer, because like my ideas and my input is going to shift drastically what your project will look like. Yeah. So if you're the type of band that doesn't want that, I'm probably not your guy. You know what I mean? Like, not to say that I tinker like with every song and every moment of a record, because sometimes it's just about the best thing for the song is just getting it to sound absolutely amazing, and that's, if that's the right thing, then that's what we're gonna do. Sure. But yeah, it's always about the experience with the band. Like the band, I want them to come in and feel like there was no way that record gets made the same way without me, or without the environment we're working in, or whatever. I just think that it's an opportunity for you to get into a super creative state of mind and just get away from if you're making a record at your house and you're just at home. All the same things that happen when you're at home will happen. Mm-hmm. Like your environment is not likely to inspire you. I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, if I'm just writing music at home, there's a million distractions, there's a million things going on. Yeah. So I mean, that's just scratching the surface of it. Like, of course, like tracking drums in a great sounding drum room is, in my opinion, irreplaceable. I think sampled drums sound great. I don't think they sound like real drums.
Sure. Yeah.
That's just my opinion. It doesn't mean your record won't turn out good. It's just like, it sounds different to me. I'm all about like having ideas and fresh ideas and sort of like ambitions for a project or a song, and being able to explore those in a you have to be careful. You have to be able to explore ideas in a timely manner, so you're not wasting your time and the band's time and the studio time. Sure. But you also want to be super creative. So me having enough time to process like what the demo sounds like, or what maybe they just send me like, here, we jammed in our practice room for 45 minutes and these are all of our ideas, whatever it is, whatever I've got. They might just send me a playlist of these are the bands we are influenced by right now, and we're trying to sort of sound like this. That might be all I get. So it's just like, okay, let me listen to this playlist. What is the common thread here? What should I take away from this? Like, is it stuff I've heard before? Is it stuff I've never heard?
Yeah.
So these are all just like the little pieces that lead me into a project. But I always want to come in with a lot of ideas and insight. And even if the band goes, no, we don't really like any of that. It's like, okay, I'm not super easily offended in that way. Like,
gotcha.
I want the band to be super happy. And if me bringing a bunch of ideas really rattles them, then I kind of just have to change my strategy and how we like approach this stuff.
Is there a way that you gauge that when you're trying to pitch some of your pre-production ideas to a band?
Just gotta look at them. See how scared they get, They might be super spooked. Okay. It's, sometimes you're gonna just butt heads. Sometimes you have someone really hard-headed who's like, wants to get their way. I get that. This is kind of how I am,
Yeah.
This is why I don't run my own band anymore. It's a nightmare. So I understand that. I feel like having so much band experience and being the guy who wanted to be in the band and touring all the time and whatever, I can really relate to even the toughest, people to deal with. And I think that actually has made me a good fit with some of the people who go, oh man, working with this guy is crazy, And it's like, I get it. Like, I understand what it's like to be a musician and sort of just have your head so fully wrapped around what the project is, and you're just insane. You don't know. It's like nothing makes sense. I've been there, and I get there when I'm writing my own material or whatever. That happens all the time. So as a producer, I relate to that and try to guide people out of that mentality. Like, let's try stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let's try it. If it doesn't work, we'll throw it away. We'll do something else,
What you said right there, that sticks out to me. Let's just try it. I think one of the things that I find myself saying to bands when we're working on a record is, hey, guys, it only takes 15 minutes to try an idea. If you don't like it, it's cool. Let's get rid of it, And that works both ways. I think as a producer, that works when you've got your own idea and you're trying to campaign for why they should try it. Yeah. But I think it also works good for this situation that happens sometimes in a band where you've got, one guy is sitting over on the couch, and he's been hearing the song all day long, and he's got this idea that's kind of crept up from somewhere, and finally he's decides to pitch it to his bandmates and, put himself out there, and maybe there's two other guys in the band like, no, dude, that idea just totally sucks. I think it's a really good way to kind of mediate that situation with the band and just be like, hey, let's just try it. It only takes 15 minutes. It's an idea, Right. Just because we record it doesn't mean that we have to keep it.
For sure,
It's Pro Tools, it's not tape. And even with tape, you can get rid of it. We're going to make this series on producing a rock song, and part of this idea came out of, I've already been doing a series on the channel producing a country song step by step, but that series for me is focusing more on things that are technical and how I like to do things. What do you want people to get out of this as they're watching this? Because I think we both agreed as we were kind of talking and planning what we were going to shoot and what you were going to do, is that there wasn't really a precedent with having you here for us to do more, here's how you stick a microphone in front of a cabinet videos. There's nothing wrong with those, and I'm I've made some of those, and I'm making probably some more of those. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the people that have done those. Certainly, people can learn from different styles of teacher, and it's okay to recreate different versions of that thing. But you really kind of wanted to do something that was different than that. So what are you hoping that people are going to see from walking through when we start talking about your drum recording decisions and your guitar recording decisions and things like that?
Yeah, I thought, of course, the technical stuff matters, like how we're miking the cab and like how we're miking the drums and all that stuff. That absolutely plays into the sound of the record. But I didn't really find that part really interesting for like making a video series out of it. I think there's a ton of information. I was more interested in making a video that captures like the process, like what is it like to actually play a guitar and have the guitar sound be big, because if you can't hit the chord right, no matter what you do on the technical side of things, it's not going to sound right. So how to approach, whether it's for yourself or like coaching the musicians like in the studio, how to approach performance, that's huge. I think that is really what separates tremendously like huge awesome guitar sounds from sounds that are just okay or sounds that are bad or whatever. I think performance plays in massively. And so I was like, well, we should just focus on performance, because I'm constantly helping artists and musicians, like coaching them, like, oh, you should move your hand like this, like, well, we maybe need to tune just this chord, or maybe we need to do like just getting the sound to match what's in our heads. That's like a really challenging thing, and can be really time consuming. So I wanted to just focus on that stuff and less about where does the mic go? Well, it goes right on the speaker. Bam,
Well, and I think that what you're talking about can be one of the things that's kind of the often overlooked thing, and maybe because of the generation that we live in, the whole, I hate to say it, but YouTube University kind of mentality, where it's like, oh, I need to go and figure out how do I record a big rock guitar. And so you go and you find the video, and somebody shows you to stick the mic in front of the cab, and you think, okay, I got it. I'm going to do that thing that they did, and then I'll get the rock guitar thing. And then you play it back, and you're like, well, gosh, mine doesn't sound like theirs at all. What's the difference? And it's what you're talking about. It's the player, it's the performance, it's how they're holding the guitar, it's how they're striking the chord, it's how they're letting it ring out. All those kind of things can be applied to the bands that you're working with.
As cliche as it sounds, you could steal all the settings and have the exact same gear, exact same guitar, and I could play the song and someone else could play the song, and the song is going to sound completely different. So as a producer, as an engineer, what can you do if those are your circumstances and the artist is playing the song and it doesn't sound right? How do you coach the guitarist? How do you coach the bassist? How do you convince them to maybe take a knee and I'll do it? You know what I mean? Like there's so many options. And so I was more interested in diving in on that stuff, because to me that's really the make or break of like how to have a really tight, really polished sounding record. And that's not for everyone. There's records I love that are sloppy and crazy and sound stupid, and I love them. For no good reason. I think they're great.
So this series is going to be largely philosophical, in a sense.
You just described me.
Largely philosophical. So, but we're also going to get to hear some sounds too, right? Because that's definitely a thing that you do. You love to play around with pedals and amps and different guitars, and you always bring scads of stuff with you when you come up to do a record up here, so.
No doubt. And we'll absolutely get into that stuff, because I think that really blends in with my philosophy on how to make something exciting, Like, anyone can cut a cool live record or whatever and just, like, jam out and have a great guitar sound or, like, a great bass sound or drums or whatever. And I love that stuff, but where the really fun, exciting stuff happens sometimes is like just really getting into the details and like tinkering with pedals or tinkering with outboard gear or amps or whatever. So we'll get into that stuff, of course, because that's hugely important to my process of making a record stand out and be something special.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it. This is going to serve as our intro video for this series, and then we're going to kick it off, and in the next video, we're going to see some stuff about drums, and then some bass and some guitar stuff, so.
It's good.
There we go. Awesome.